हेलो फ्रेंड्स, केजी क्लासेस में आपका स्वागत है। आज हम आपको विलियम वर्ड्सवर्थ के एक्सप्लेनेशन के बारे में बताएंगे। फर्स्ट है नाउ वाइल से लेकर स्ट्रॉन्ग लाइंस 19 to 24। दीज लाइंस ऑफ द फेमस ओडे इंटीमेशंस ऑफ इमॉर्टैलिटी डिस्क्राइब्स वर्ड्सवर्थ फीलिंग of relief when all the objects of nature are expressive of joy. Wordsworth still enjoy the beauty of rainbow, rose, the moon, and the water of lakes, but he finds something, a glory missing from the surface of the earth. The beauty which he used to enjoy in nature during his childhood is not seen by him now when he is grown up. In the picture's spring season, the poet finds the birds singing and lambs rejoicing. He is pleased to see the birds chirping joyously and the young lambs leaping about as if dancing rhythmically with the sound of the tabor. In the midst of such rejoicing of nature, Wordsworth alone feels sad and gloomy. It is due to the fact that the poet misses the celestial lights that invested all objects of nature in his earlier years. But there is an occasion of relief. He expresses his grief through his poetic utterance, and his outlet brings some relief to his grievous soul. Through such utterance, he again feels morally strong and once again cheerful. The expression "a timely utterance" has been ascribed by the critics of various poems of Wordsworth. According to some critics, it there too the poem "My heart leaps up when I behold," while some other critics say that it is resolution and independence that gave relief to the poet's sad heart. Next है ओ devils day से लेकर I hear lines 42 to 50. These lines have been extracted from Wordsworth's famous ode Intimations of Immortality. In the fine spring season, birds and animals are all rejoicing in their own ways. But the poet is sad at heart, for he misses that charm and splendor in nature which he used to enjoy in his earlier years. However, the poet feels relieved when he expresses his feeling through his verse. No longer will he remain gloomy and do injustice to the otherwise cheerful atmosphere around him. He feels the fullness of the bliss that blessed creatures are enjoying. Wordsworth feels that it would be pitiable on his part if he remains dejected even in the midst of the gaiety of nature. How can he remain gloomy in the month of May? It is the time when the whole of the earth is adorned with fresh flowers and plants. In the sweet morning of May, children are seen plucking and gathering flowers far and wide in the valley. The sun is shining brightly and spreadingly its warmth all around. The little babe leaps over the lap of his or her mother, quite in keeping with the beautiful and joyous season. Wordsworth hears the call of nature with all his hearts. Wordsworth, the high priest of nature, is seen in these lines, identifying himself in feeling and sympathy with the objects of nature. He considers nature as a living being with feelings of its own. Therefore, when he describes the various activities of the spring season, he at once plunges himself in an intercommunion with the objects of nature. Next है but there's से लेकर ड्रीम लाइन्स 51 to 57. These lines have been extracted from Wordsworth's famous ode, Intimations of Immortality. In the fine spring season, birds and animals are all rejoicing in their own ways. Wordsworth feels that it would be pitiable on his part if he remains dejected even in the midst of the gaiety of nature. In the month of May, the earth is adorned with fresh flowers and plants, and children are seen gathering sweet flowers far and wide in the valley. The little infant rejoices in the lap of the mother, while the poet wants to participate wholeheartedly in the jollity of nature. He at the same time cannot forget the loss of the brightness and radiance that he used to find in nature during his earlier years. As he sees one particular tree out of so many, he is again reminded of the immense loss this particular tree and the field which he saw in his childhood speaks to him in unmistakable language of the irrevocable departure of the heavenly grandeur from earthly objects. The tree and the field reminds him that something is gone in spite of his utmost effort to reconcile with the present joy from the object of nature. Even the fancy flower growing near his feet reminds him of the same table. In other words, every object forces the sense of loss upon the mind of the poet. The poet is once again forced to ask the same questions as to where the former glory has gone and where the divine light which is used to perceive in objects of nature has now disappeared. These lines form the end of the first part of the poem. This part, stanza 1st to 4th, was composed by Wordsworth in the year 1802-1803. After which there was a gap of 4 years. The obstinate question raised by the poet have been subsequently answered by him in the coming stanzas. About these lines, Clara L. Thompson has commented, Wordsworth thinks it strange that one tree and one field only out of many trees and fields around him should have power to recall his loss to him. They were perhaps a tree and fields closely connected with some incident in his boyhood, and thus the sight of them revived the old sensation more keenly than those with which he had no such association. Our birth से लेके infancy, lines 58 to 67. These lines form the beginning of the second part of Wordsworth's famous ode, Intimations of Immortality. The first ends with a note of sadness at the loss of the visionary gleam, the glory and the dream. The poet, feeling himself in isolation on a happy May morning, tries to join in the general rejoicing of birds, lambs, streams and children, but the sight of tree and a field remind him of something that is gone. In these lines, Wordsworth tries to explain the crisis or questions raised in the earlier stanza. He tells that our birth is like falling asleep. Just as during sleep we forget this world, so at the time of birth we forget about our previous existence. Wordsworth means to say that with birth we do not awake in consciousness but rather lapse away from consciousness of the bliss that we enjoyed in heaven. Our soul, which guides our life as a star guides a ship, has a residence in heaven before It is born in this world. The soul ends its tender in heaven and comes from a distant place with a consciousness of its blissful existence in heavens. Wordsworth means to say that the soul does not begin its career in his world on a clean slate. For a few reminiscences of the past still cling to it is accompanied by heavenly reminiscence, just as the rising star has bright clouds trailing behind it. Heaven is our permanent abode, the earth being a temporary residence. When we are accompanied by the lingering remains of heavenly light in childhood. We are surrounded by traces of heavenly glory. In other words, in our childhood, we retain the clearest vision of our heavenly existence. The child is never to heaven than a grown-up man. The lines are based on the Wordsworth's faith in Platonic doctrine of pre-existence of the soul. According to Plato, the soul exists in the ideal world before it comes into this world. Plato also originated the theory of reminiscence. The idea of the life beyond death also finds expression in Shelley's Adonais. Peace, peace, he is not dead, he doth not sleep, he hath awakened from the dream of life. Next stanza is shaded of ... common day. Line 68 to 77. In his famous ode Intimations of Immortality, Wordsworth tells how our soul comes to stay for a temporary period in this world. Heaven is the eternal home of the soul, but at the time of our birth, we are not completely oblivious of our past existence. In our childhood, we are surrounded by the heavenly glory. The child still has vision of a divine origin. In these lines, Wordsworth tells how worldly allurement and limitations drag the child away from heavenly visions. As we advance in life from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to adulthood, the vision of the divine glory becomes fainter. This world is a prison, and its shadows engulf the growing boy more and more. The boy still has some idea of his prior existence and also the place from where he came. As he grows older, he moves farther and farther away from the visionary light of his childhood. It is also true that even at this time he retains his love of nature and is accompanied by the glimpse of divine glory. But when he grows up into a man, this vision completely vanishes away. He is now absorbed in the affairs of the world. The divine light becomes indistinguishable in the broad glory of common daylight. The glorious life of the child merges into the everyday life of ordinary man. नेक्स्ट है अर्थ फिल्स से लेकर केम. लाइन्स 78 to 85. इन हिज famous ode Intimation of Immortality, Wordsworth tells us that the child retains visions of divine glory, but he grows up, these visions become fainter and fainter. The shades of this world completely engulf the grown-up man. In these lines, Wordsworth considers the earth as the stepmother or the nurse of the child. When the child is left to the care of this earth, she provides the child with all kinds of pleasure. The earth provides man with all kinds of material pleasure of life. Earth has its own natural desires. As soon as man is born on this earth, he is filled with earthly longing and desires. Though a stepmother, only the earth has the affection of a real mother towards the child. She does so not with any bad aim, but to make the child forget his prenatal existence. She makes all pleasures available to the child to make him happy and thus forget the glories of heaven from where he came to this earth. The child is so engrossed in worldly pleasure that he forgets his original home, heaven. Next है सी एट हिज से लेकर इमिटेशन तक लाइन्स 91 to 108. In these lines, which are taken from the famous ode Intimations of Immortality, Wordsworth relates the various pleasures in which the child engages himself most of his time. Wordsworth draws a vivid picture of a child of 6 who is engrossed in a number of amusements that he has recently learned to enjoy. Wordsworth tells that at the feet of the child are some toys which he has arranged with his newly acquired skill to represent some actual incident from life. Sometimes it is the scene of a wedding or some festival, or even a scene of mourning or funeral. The child changes his tone according to the nature of the game. His attention is totally absorbed in the game at hand. Sometimes he will speak dialogues of business, sometimes the love or of strife. But the child is of a shifting mood. Very soon he gives up this game and with new joy and zeal undertakes some fresh one. In fact, he behaves like an actor. He performs the roles from that of a healthy child to that of an old man suffering from paralysis. He is one of the many characters on the stage of life. He tries to exhibit all the humors of mankind by imitating action of a superior. It appears that the sole pleasure of the child lies in imitating the ways and actions of grown-up people, while relating the various imitative activities of the child. Wordsworth perhaps had in his mind the 4-year-old son of St. Coleridge. When he speaks of the child in terms of an actor, he seems to remember the well-known speech of Jacques in As You Like It, Act 2, Scene 4. About the ideas contained in these lines, C.M. Bora observes Wordsworth knew that the visionary power was closely connected with the imagination and the creative process. The child fashions his own little world of the mind because he is divinely inspired by heavenly memories. The child's whole vocation seems to be endless imitation because his creative spirit is still unsullied and unhampered. नेक्स्ट दाऊ से लेकर फाइन लाइन्स 109 to 118. These lines are taken from Wordsworth's great ode Intimation of Immortality. Wordsworth considers the child as superior to grown-up men. He has a clearer spiritual vision than man because he is nearer to heaven, his original home. Here Wordsworth says that the child may be small in appearance, but his soul is endowed with immense greatness. His outward small stature disguises the greatness of his soul. He is the best philosopher, one who still cherishes the memories of his heavenly abode. The grown-up people are spiritually blind, but the child is able to see the celestial light. He remains deaf, for he does not give any hearing to earthly temptations. He is also silent because he only feels the celestial joy and cannot describe it. It is he who understands the secret of eternity. The vision of heaven constantly visits him. Further, Wordsworth considers the child as a mighty prophet and a blessed seer. He is aware of those truths which the grown-ups to do know. The grown-ups struggle all their lives to discover these truths, but fail on account of their ignorance. Wordsworth means to say that whereas the child is spiritually enlightened, the grown-up man grows in the spiritual darkness because the earth is too much with him. Coleridge was highly critical of Wordsworth for his calling the child the best philosopher. He asked, in what sense is a child of that age philosopher? In what does he read the eternal deep? In what sense is he declared to be forever haunted by the Supreme Being, or so inspired to deserve the splendid titles of a mighty prophet, a blessed seer? But Geoffrey Durant has given an appropriate justification. He remarks, the apparent extravagance of this idea, which was severely castigated by Coleridge, is less extreme if we remember that the child is here being contrasted with the adult, and that the child is called a philosopher only by a kind of paradox. Although deaf and silent and therefore incapable of understanding what it knows, the child is a philosopher only by being naturally close to the source of joy. The terms that Wordsworth uses makes it plain that he does not think of the child as a practitioner of conscious wisdom, but as experiencing the life to which the philosopher aspires. The praise of the child, however, looks less extravagant if it is contrasted with the life which the adult is condemned to live. Next, thou over से लेकर एज ए लाइफ तक, लाइन्स 119 to 129. In these lines taken from the great audio intimations of immortality, Wordsworth contrasts the life of a child with that of a grown-up man. The child is the best philosopher and the blessed seer. He has the vision of heavenly glory, whereas the grown-up man grasps in spiritual darkness. His outward small stature disguises the greatness of his soul. In these lines, Wordsworth tells that the child is constantly aware of his immortality. Heavenly glory hovers around him as the sunshine surrounds a man, just as the master constantly keeps watch over the slave. So is the child constantly watched over by his maker, God. In other words, the child is constantly governed by his knowledge of immortality. The consciousness of his sense of immortality is not an insignificant thing. Further, Wordsworth tells the child that he still enjoys the feelings of freedom which he inherited from heaven. He is therefore at the height of his existence. When Wordsworth sees the child imitating the action of the grown-up, he advises him, the child, not to anticipate the mature years of his life. The child provokes the years in the sense that he desires and strives to be grown up. By doing so, he is simply inviting the cares and anxieties of this world too early, and thus spoiling his sense of heavenly life. Wordsworth here wants to suggest that the child foolishly imitates the action of the grown-ups. Thus he invites the maturity too soon. He must not forget that when he grows up, he will not be able to enjoy freedom from worldly bondage. responsibilities and cares are bound to be his share. When he grows up, he will have to face all that lies in the destiny of man. The weight of the social conventions will be upon his soul as heavenly as frost. It will be as profound as life itself. While idealizing childhood as the best, the noblest period of life, Wordsworth warns the child not to be very anxious to grow up too soon. The burden of life will inevitably come to him. Therefore, he should enjoy freedom, which is a gift to him from heaven, as long as possible. This passage has often been adversely criticized for its theoretical and strained tone, but it should be noted that the whole passage is suffused with irony. The child is paradoxically at once the bearer of the heavenly message of joy and at the same time the willing and even eager agent of its own imprisonment in the world of the senses. ड्यूरेंट नेक्स्ट है ओ जॉय से लेकर प्रेज लाइन्स 130 to 141. These lines have been taken from Wordsworth's great or intimations of immortality. While idealizing the child, the poet considers the child as superior to the grown-up man in the spiritual perception of divinity. The child is the mighty prophet, seer, blessed. Wordsworth, however, warns the child not to deliberately imitate the actions of adult, for he is destined to have his full share of sorrows and anxieties of human life. The heavy weight of worldly convention will crush his spirit as frost crushes the grass underneath it. But Wordsworth finds joy in another thought. It is a matter of joy for him that even in our mature age we have fond memories of the experiences of our childhood. It is true that in manhood the awareness of our spiritual heritage slowly dies out, but even at this stage we can recall the inclusive vision of childhood. In other words, even the mature man can recall through faintly the feeling of immortality and heavenly life which is used to experience so vividly. But Wordsworth make it clear that his joy in recalling his childhood is not due to the well-known blessing of childhood. He does not feel happy at the thought of delight, liberty, and ever fresh hopes of childhood. Childhood is endowed with all such blessings, but Wordsworth is thankful to childhood for some other things and not for these blessings. In these lines, Wordsworth picturizes childhood with the help of some very apt images. The first is the image of fire which slowly dies out in course of time, leaving ashes behind. The vision of childhood also slowly dies out in old age, yet the spark remains underneath. In another image, hope has been likened to a young bird which flutters with its new fledged wings. Here Wordsworth imitates Milton, who is his Comus compares hope to a newly born bird. Next है but for से लेकर surprised, line 142 to 148. These lines have been taken from Wordsworth's great odd intimation of immortality. Wordsworth finds joy in the thought that even in our mature age we have faint memories of the experiences of our childhood. Even when grown up, we can recall through faintly the feeling of immortality and heavenly life experienced in childhood. Wordsworth make it clear that his joy in recalling his childhood is not due to the well-known blessings of childhood. He is thankful to childhood for some other things which are of greater significance. Wordsworth refers to those things in which the grown-up man takes delight. The memory of childhood is not to be valued merely because it is a remembrance of days of delight, but because it causes him to question the absolute value of the world around him. In other words, Wordsworth feels thankful to childhood because of the doubts about the existence of the objects of the outside world. During the period of childhood, he had doubt about the reality of the divine worlds in which he moved about. The material things seemed to fall away from him and vanish into unreality, but in his reflexive mood, he realizes that the lofty nature of his childhood makes his sinful nature tremble much as a criminal caught red-handed. Wordsworth means to say that in his childhood he experienced a vague perception of the world of spirit. It was a period when he experienced very noble feelings and lofty impulses and instinct, but as a grown-up man, he feels like a guilty person, for now his life is devoid of the former loftiness. Wordsworth has himself explained his childhood experiences. I was often unable to think of external things as having external existence. I communed with all that I saw as something not apart from but inherent in my own immaterial nature. Many times while going to school have I grasped at a wall or tree to recall myself from this abyss of idealism to the reality. नेक्स्ट है वट फोर से लेकर डेस्ट्रॉय लाइन्स 149 to 161. These lines have been taken from Wordsworth's great odd intimations of immortality. Wordsworth expresses his gratefulness to childhood, but not for the well-known blessings such as delight, freedom, and hopefulness. He thanks childhood for other reasons, for the persistent doubts about the existence of tangible objects, for vague imitations of existence of a world of spirit, and also for the high and noble instinct which are experienced in childhood. Wordsworth further explains his thankfulness to childhood. He is grateful to that period because of those primary and simple feelings and those vague remembrances of a previous existence in heaven which have always been a source of joy to him. Whatever may be their ultimate cause and effect, they are the primary sources of all our knowledge. They are the sources of all our wisdom and happiness. These memories give us strength and inspiration and makes us feel that the years of troubled activities spent in the world are only moments in the vast space of eternity. These memories are in fact the spiritual truth realized by the child. Wordsworth tells that once these truths are visualized through mystical illuminations, neither idleness nor the mad pursuit of material objects nor the preoccupations of boyhood or manhood, or not all that destroy our joys, can completely destroy their influence. Here Wordsworth means to state that the faint memories of the divine origin always exist in the mind of man. They are never destroyed by any kinds of worldly pleasure or pursuit. In fact, the shadowy Recollections of such experiences are the fountain light of all our day. The thought of these lines may seem to be a bit complex. It begins by asserting the gratitude of the poet for the childhood's sense of unity of being, even though this is lost its very existence in the past, is a reminder to us that man is more than the sum total of his anxieties, transient pleasures and petty aims. Durant. नेक्स्ट है बी बिल से लेकर माइंड लाइन्स 180 to 187. These lines have been taken from Wordsworth's great odd intimations of immortality. Wordsworth feels compensated in the thought that early sympathy for nature which is felt in his childhood still continues to be a source of inspiration in his grown-up years. He still finds a great joy in the song of birds and dance of lambs. It matters little to him that the heavenly glory that he used to experience in childhood has now departed. The splendor in the grass and glory in the floor cannot come back. What Wordsworth's maturity brings to him other kinds of compensation. He gives up the idea of expressing grief over the loss. On the other hand, he tries to seek consolation and moral strength from what remains for him. At least he has got an understanding of that fundamental sympathy that subsists between man and nature, which having been once experienced in childhood must never die away. The consolation also comes from his thoughts of human suffering. Now at least he has a sympathetic understanding of the sufferings of his fellow men, and lastly he has gained a staunch faith in a life after death. He has also achieved that thoughtfulness which is the gift of maturity. Wordsworth realizes the power of calm and philosophic thinking of the mature age. No doubt in this age the absence of childhood joys is felt, but this age has its own joys, the joys of nobler quality, the joys that bring philosophic calm to the agitated mind of a man. The primal joy is left behind, and in its place is left a strengthened faith in the value of all life and a renewed confidence in the power of intellect to offer support to man in the years that bring the philosophic mind. Durant. Thanks. Best of luck.